research and access if
I-
one or other was easier.
I prefer that. I prefer that the person we're dealing with now was perhaps more alive on the inside, closer to the rest of the flesh and blood people that walk this planet. But if you've seen the film, clearly the loss of humanity is very real.
Yeah, and Maria, what about you?
I am going to say that I wish I got the chance to meet her, because I think she would have said a lot of interesting things. She's been very complex as a human being, and I really wish I got to meet her. Recently I got to meet, for a short period of time, Nikki Haskell, who's been one of her dear friends, and she gave me a little bit of information who she was, apart from my research. But yeah, I mean, I wish she was here.
That was a very tactful answer, Sebastian. And I think the hardest thing with this is that this could so easily be like a Saturday Night Live skit, caricature. So for both of you, what were some of the essential things to make sure you were never veering into that?
Well, I mean, there's sort of, kind of the job that we have, which is sort of to kind of put aside our own personal feelings and have to go in there really like investigators and try to sort of look at this like a case. It's a puzzle you're trying to solve. And like any other role, I just really was trying to understand what happened and what is driving this person ultimately. What is he hiding? What is he selling you now? How did it all kind of come about? And what's at the core? And there's a lot of information. There's a lot of footage out there. There's a lot of articles from the time period. I mean, that was maybe the blessing here, because there's so much on him that you can kind of really go and do it for yourself if you want. You can figure it out, as we did. I think the hard part obviously was, kind of just trying to open a door for you in a certain way where I know it's already closed before you even walk in the theater, because we've seen all kinds of different takes on this person and but never actually something that I think tries to get to the core of who he is, as this film did. And then I think it was just, every day, just for hours on end, trying to take on, what are recognizable features that he has that have been overdone, but do it to some extent where it feels earned and it's not put on and it doesn't feel like I'm trying to replicate something. It's just, you're not thinking about it. It's like learning an instrument. After a while, you're just doing it. And that was, I think, difficult because, it's one of those things where if it's a little bit too much in one scene, then immediately you're out of it. If it's not enough, then you're not really buying it. And I had plenty of people remind me, to Wazoo that I didn't look like him and all that stuff. So I think it was just finding that balance.
Maria, what about for you? Obviously, maybe less of a publicly recognizable figure now, but certainly back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you all for being here. It's right before Christmas. It means coming and watching here. We've been having quite a ride with this movie. A lot of people fear to go and give it a chance, even though I think the movie speaks for itself and it doesn't really take sides. It probably gives you a glimpse of like how things happen, as Sebastian said, and a little bit of a glimpse of who Ivana was. I personally wasn't really familiar who that woman was. I'm Bulgarian. I was born and raised in Eastern Europe, in Bulgaria. I knew the face, I knew the name, and I knew that she's been married to, while we showed the movie, the former president of America and the future one. pretty much that was all I knew about her. I didn't know that she's been a dedicated athlete. I didn't know that she's been well educated. I didn't know that she's been a competitive skier. I didn't know that she's been a competitive swimmer before becoming a skier. And I didn't know that she's been involved with the whole business behind closed doors. I didn't know that a lot of the ideas of the business came from her side. I didn't know that she's been a hardworking woman, writing books, wanting to have like a whole empire on her side. So the more I got to know about her, the more impressed I became because, you know, weirdly, I have a feeling that we share kind of a similar mentality about the fact that you're not usually given a lot of chances if you're on that side of the world, in that region of the world, in Eastern Europe. These countries are countries that have been under communistic dictatorship, if I'm allowed to say that. And you develop a mindset that you have to be really hardworking because there's somebody behind your back and they're waiting for your place. So she was that. She wanted to be perfect. She wanted to know everything. She wanted to train hardest. And similarly, when I met Sebastian, because he's from a fellow country in Romania, born and raised up until you were
Well,
6, 7?
until I was 8, yeah.
8. Yeah. Similarly to when I met Sebastian, but similarly to when Ivana met Donald, I think she recognized like an equal, like somebody that's been very driven, very ambitious, very much wanting to rule the world, which for her case, she didn't grow up there. She didn't know what it does it take to be in that position. For him, I feel like getting to know Roy and getting to know his father, maybe it's been a different situation. But pretty much, yeah, doing a lot of research, back to the question, watching a lot of interviews and reading her fictional books as well. It's been really interesting that to see some woman that's been pretty much outspoken and ahead of her time, it's been quite remarkable and inspirational.
And this relationship between the two of them is kind of a litmus test for how much he's changing as he goes along. For you, how much real love did you think was there? And did you think at a certain point that one or the other of them wasn't capable of that anymore? Or how did you find that dynamic?
Look, I mean, for me, you know, I had this ritual every day, basically, when I would get there at like 4 in the morning, and I'd have these 2 hours in the makeup chair. I would watch the Rona Barrett 1980 interview that he did, which we kind of have a clip of, and it's about an hour or so. And I'd watch that thing over and over again, over and over again. And you know, it's tough because when you watch that, you sort of see a very different person. You know, you still see a humanity there, and someone who seemingly is at least aware of, you know, as he talks about it, and sort of slight vulnerable ways about marriage and love and all these things. And so I do believe, and also if you look at the American Dream, you know, which is on Netflix, and another great book I read called Confidence Man also is really, really very revealing about those early years. You know, I think there was, Ivana and his brother were maybe the only anchors to humanity that I've discovered in him, you know, and I do think that there was a real bond there, you know, and we didn't want to ignore that, you know, we really wanted to kind of try and capture all the sides of this person, regardless of, you know, what he becomes, but it's a tricky thing to talk about because there's sort of this, you know, this idea of like humanizing somebody, and everyone sort of has strong feelings about that, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I would throw it in the mix again in considering that when we're talking about this world of humanizing, that it isn't just sympathy. Sympathy is just maybe one reaction somebody might have. It's also about showing how, you know, there's flaws, and everyone, you know, is capable of losing that humanity. Everyone, you know, people are able to to grow out of that as he seemingly did, you know, and I think that's why there's value to the movie as opposed to, and I want to stress again the word movie because there's a way of having an experience with these people and this journey that you're not going to necessarily get from whatever news channel you're looking at or whatever you're following on TikTok, whatever, you know, how you're getting your news bites, and we all know they're hammering us with it. So, but right, I think we felt that there was a real connection there between them, and of course and the argument can be made that, you know, would he have gotten to where he had gotten at that time in the 80s if it wasn't for Ivana, and who reminded him to some extent of his mother in some ways. But it was clearly when she started to kind of get her own footing that is when he abandons her.
And then in terms of the rape scene, no matter what, filming something like that is going to be a very sensitive and delicate thing to do. There's a whole extra layer here. So can you both talk a little bit about how you prepared for that and how much all the outside stuff surrounding that weighed on you while you were performing, if at all?
Well, that scene has been existing in the script ever since I got to read it for the first time. We talked about it. We rehearsed physically how to manage to not hurt each other. Ali made sure that on the day it's going to be a closed set, so nobody's going to feel uncomfortable. We had an intimacy coordinator, we had the stunt coordinator. Everything was very much blocked physically. That's on the mechanical side, technical side. On the emotional level, because, you know, it's sometimes scary to do a scene when it includes nudity. It's sometimes scary when you do, I don't know, an intimate scene. But what's more scary for me, maybe because I'm Eastern European, maybe because I went through a theatrical training, what's more scary is when you go through an emotional nudity, and I feel like that's the core of this scene, and betrayal and heartbreak. Violence should not exist in the first place. Assault should not exist. Abuse should not exist, no matter which shape or form, whether that's domestic, public, narcissistic, doesn't matter, it should not be there. So it's always a challenge to read a scene when it's including a domestic violence. It's always challenging to try to be in the shoes of a survivor, and it's always challenging when you're watching it, even if you are the person who's been in front of the camera shooting it. But when things like this happen, and back then, in these years, that's been her truth. All of the scenes in the movie are fact-checked. So back in that time, for her, that's been reality, and she survived. It's important to shine light on issues that usually are hard to talk about, but because we have art, because we have platform, maybe it's important to shine bright light on these issues, because movies can influence the world. Movies can help people actually go through really challenging times and challenging situations in their lives. And if that scene can help people get in touch with organization or a platform or find a way to survive something like this, it's important. As a movie, I think that's not the center of the movie. The movie is not centered around domestic abuse. But it's important for the characters. It's important how relationships shift and how people change and how much that can hurt you to the deepest when you don't not that when you don't expect it, but when you share your life, when that's basically your life. To be hurt physically and emotionally, intentionally, it's the ugliest thing that you can witness and that you can experience. And that's why I think I I value her as a woman, as a survivor. It takes courage to leave a situation like this, and it takes courage to choose the right moment, and it takes courage to reach for help, which she fortunately did in the future. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about this and yet not enough. But I think for our movie, we see like a hole in this relationship, a hole in this human being, a hole in someone else's heart, and that changed the direction of the story of the characters in general.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we set out, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to be a part of this film was because of this director, Ali Abbasi, who I think is a really incredible filmmaker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his previous work. He's done some other films that, before this, Holy Spider, which was also based on a true story in Iran. And I liked him. I thought there was value in someone like him approaching the story because I knew, not being from here, he was really going to go and try to approach this from a non-biased place, and actually try to mine for the truth. And you know, and obviously we had our writer Gabe Sherman, who has researched everything to no end in this film, including that particular scene, which is born out of a testimony that she's given under oath, which she then retracted in front of lawyers, perhaps because there was threats or settlements that happened. But when you make a decision about including something like that, you ask yourself, or Gabe Sherman asked himself, what would be closer to the truth, what you gave under oath or what you did later in front of lawyers, right? So, and I think, as we said, you know, because there were some Republican friends I've had who came to see the movie, and they all said, "Oh, I love the first half of the movie," and it's it's very reflective of this selective thinking, you know, which is sort of like, don't show me the bad side. And it's like, well, but you have to really be in severe denial of reality if we're talking about the guy who's, you know, on that Access Hollywood tape is saying grab him by the whatever, and then like this is completely in line with who he is, you know, and actually very appropriate for the film, and in line with honoring, you know, and so I think that was why it was kept, and we had to fight for it because that was one of the things that our financier at the time was trying to stop the movie from coming out with.
Two more questions and then we'll open
A
it.
waitress if your behavior is inappropriate. So having that scene back then gave me maybe a glimpse of like, okay, so people should be judged by their actions, not by their positions. With this movie here, I don't really consider it being a political movie in a way of like taking sides in political parties, because people leave this alone with a different opinion. But it's a political description, it's a political dive into the underbelly of a whole system. And we see another lawyer in the face of Roy Cohn, who's been also very important person of power, who's been doing a lot of inappropriate things 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So at the end of the day, it's about a system. Maybe that's the only thing that I understood comparing both movies. I don't think any of my characters have been political, though. But they are characters of strong, multi-layered women. One of them a teenager, the other one just young adult. And they happen to meet some very strange people.
And then for both of you, before we go to the audience, we're about to go into another Trump presidency. After your experiences on this, is there any advice or lessons learned that you can impart to help us get through the next 4 years?
Resist indifference, for one. Because I think it's easy now, and everyone's exhausted. You know, he always said one thing, which is, I wait for bad times, and when bad times come, that's when I know what I need to be doing. And there's footage of that of him in this Netflix documentary, The American Dream, saying that. And that's exactly what he's done. It's like he's exhausted everybody to no end. So now we're all like, just like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to get home and go to sleep. You know, I want to see my family. I don't want to get, and that's normal. That's human. You know. But I think we have to try. At least for me. I mean, we have to try to look at this with a closer lens and somewhat objectively rather than subjectively. We have to try to understand what it is about him that's connecting with certain people, and we have to try to resist, which is going to be very hard. We have to try to resist to attack, you know, these other people that we disagree with, or wherever the disagreement is, because divisiveness is what he wants. That's what he rides on. That's what every single dictator, everyone has done, and what he's doing is he's given people permissions to lose their empathy, to lose their morals, to say what they want, to go up to people and be physical with them, to, you know, it's and I think, you know, what this movie at least tries to do is, because you have to ask yourself why he doesn't want you to see this movie, why he's tried very hard to not let this movie come out, okay? And I think one of the reasons is because it really does show him for who he is. It's not this sort of savior that he's casting himself as. He's an enabler. He's a fugazi, okay? You know that term? Fugazi, you know, Donnie Brasco, it's a fugazi, it's a fake. And you know, and the only credit I can give him is that he's very good at creating characters, and that's what he's done. We've been living with the apprentice character that's come later, but what he doesn't want you to see is the fact that there's a very deeply insecure, paranoid, very self-driven person that's still living out a revenge tale that we're all being punished for, and it goes back to those beginning years. And so when people go, why should I see this movie? Because I don't want to see him sort of in these ways that make me feel for him. I go, well, then you should see it and ask yourself if you're going to trust this person at the end of the day. You know, so I think there's great value in that. I worry that you know, it's very easy to sort of like numb out and not deal with, you know, things that are uncomfortable in a way. But I think the only, you know, the movies or the books or the creative language is the only universal language we have with each other, that no matter where we come from, what our upbringing is, our point of views, our belief systems, we can all get that human to human, you know, and I think we have to keep protecting that, especially if someone wants to, you know, put a ban on it or censor it.
Anybody in the audience have a question? I saw you raise your hand first.
Amazing portrayals, both of you. Thank you so much for doing the film. Is there a campaign to get you immunity from Joe Biden before? How do we do that?
I think Joe Biden's got a lot of other problems to worry about. I don't know about that, but.
Have you felt threatened at all as anything happens?
Well, Gabe Sherman received, as predictable as it sounds, and again, we go, because we're getting so used to it, but he's received anti-Semitic threats, you know, as soon as, you know, he went on there and called the film and us human scum, you know, which is, again, something that only sort of dictators have used words like that. But it's right. It's tough to know because it's that sort of bullying kind of mentality that I think we have to keep resisting with, and the work is speaks for itself. The work is the response. You know, it's not about bullying something back necessarily. It's like continuing to shine a light on things.
Yeah, bravo to both of you for choosing to express this story. The question I have for Sebastian, one thing I noticed over time is your subtle mannerisms develop as sort of this character of Trump developed. And so I was wondering, because it was really amazing. Did you shoot chronologically, and if not, how did you manage that visual component?
A lot of Coca-Cola. Weirdly, I'm telling you, because my anxiety levels were so high that I would get low blood sugar, and I'd be like, Coca-Cola. And I'm like, oh, it works anyway, it's fine. And I'm like, he probably has the same fucking problems. Anyway, we were very lucky in the sense that he tried very hard at a lot of the 70s stuff in the beginning. So we shot this literally a year ago. Like, we were in Toronto a year ago today, and we had a break of Christmas break, and we did a lot of the 70s in the first break, and then we had the Christmas, New Year's, went back and we did the 80s stuff. But we would jump around in the same day. I could be with Roy Cohn in 1977, and because of locations, we had to shoot. Like, for instance, the last scene, which to me was the most panicked scene I had, because that's the scene where, you want to see the guy that you know, but again, if it's too much, you're like, I'm out. The red tie, enough. It's like you see the red tie and you're already like, but we shot that January 3rd. I came back January 3rd, and we went, and then we had to, because of locations, that and the Roger Stone scene, it was in the same office. And then we went back and we shot the stuff with Maria and Ski at the very end of the movie. So it was stuff like that, and to your question, like, I would have this sort of cheat sheet with Ollie sometimes where, I would lean into it a little bit more, the lips, the thing, everything, and then we would just kind of moderate it, and there were times where, it'd be less or a little bit more, but he also developed over time. I mean, he still had some of these mannerisms and stuff that he was doing them, but he wasn't like that at the beginning. So it did allow for an evolution.
We have time for one more. This lady right here. Yeah.
Thank you. Both of you just did wonderful work in this. It was spectacular, and thank you for that. And my question is, for you, Sebastian, you play real people very, very well. And besides the work you've already spoke of that you do, are there any things to tell all of us actors here, as far as playing real people? Are there any specific things that you do, besides all the prep work, that goes along with it, to help you in playing real person?
I mean, I always think of playing real people like that scene in Apollo 13, when they're trying to figure out how to get the astronauts back to Earth, and then they dump everything on the table, and then the guy just takes a rectangle and a circle, and he's like, we're gonna take this and fit it into this. It's impossible. But you have this target in sight, and you at least know where you gotta get. But I think you have to. I always remember this amazing Philip Seymour Hoffman thing where he was like, every time I read something, I have these feelings, and I have to filter and go, oh, what are the feelings that are going to work for me, that I can understand here, and what are the things that I'm feeling that are going to work against me? For me, with this story, I think, and I know you know about this and can speak to this, it's this American dream thing because of where we come from, where we were born with our parents, America. America's the land of opportunity. You got to go there, and everything's going to be possible. And I had that. It was communicated to me by my mother when I came here, but I'm still haunted by that because it's never enough. There's always another mountain. There's always someone who has more. There's always something you could be doing different. You could be making that money, and then you can go there like that person. Or if I meet that person, then finally I'll have, and it just, I wrestle with. So when I read it, I guess for me, I found the thing that for me I connected to, which was. At least this is an extreme horror version of what happens when the American dream kills somebody, the cost of it in an extreme way. And so that was my way into it. And then all of these other things that I don't relate to and I don't think about is just, it's a little bit like, it's like I said, it's like learning to play piano. You sit there and you go like for an hour and it's really slow, and then you go back again. It's a little bit that 10,000 hours rule, and then the more time you spend with it, the faster you get at it, and pretty soon you can do it in your sleep, and it just comes from somewhere. But
Thank you.
yeah.
Well, thank you both so much.
Wait, can I ask Maria one question? I'll ask Maria. Does anyone have a question for Maria? If not, I'm going to ask you something. What scared you the most about doing this?
Playing a real person. So that's why it goes to you. Great work on you for always making real people be believable, capturing the essence, making them full-fleshed with a lot of layers, good sides and bad sides. I've never played a real character before, and that's why I'm grateful that I had a great partner in your face to. No, I mean, no. I have to say that you've been exceptional, but for me it was playing a real person. I never did that before. I didn't want to play her as a caricature. I didn't want to play her as somebody that is very much empathetic, because she's been complex. She's been this larger than life character, and to a degree her relationships have been transactional, but she's been also kind, and she had a good childhood, I believe. So I tried to capture her essence, to play her with dignity, and to make her believable the way that you've always done.
Can I just say, years ago, I was walking down Larchmont Boulevard and I saw a young actor reading the script. And I stopped him and I said, "You are going to make it. You're an actor." And you said,
I worked with Manny, and I just recognized Manny for a few years. But
3 years later, I was doing a movie with you in Berlin, The Apparition. And I'm so proud of you.